Hi everyone, I'm Sandie La Nae. Welcome to Psychic Creations History Series. We have a very interesting show for you today. You are about to embark on a blast to the past. Our show is being filmed on location at the Lone Mountain Cemetery on Beverly Drive here in Carson City. We are going to be taking you on a tour around the southwest side of the cemetery to show you some historical grave sites. Thank you for watching. The Lone Mountain Cemetery history. Lone Mountain Cemetery has many of the early individuals buried here, with markers dating back to 1860. Laid to rest are several Carson City founding fathers, such as Abram McCurry, and those who developed statehood and township, such as politicians like Patrick Henry Clayton and George Tuffley. Also buried here are Virginia and Truckee Railroad magnates, such as Henry Harrington, and those who are noted, like stagecoach driver Hank Monk and Mark Twain's niece, Jenny Clemens, just to name a few. And we can't forget about the average citizen who helped Carson City grow into the community it is today. According to the land records, there were originally 7 separate cemeteries. These were merged into one cemetery in 1971, becoming known then as Lone Mountain Cemetery. Today, this 40-acre site encompasses 9 sections, which include Catholics, Grand Army of the Republic, Hebrew, Masons, Oddfellows, Veterans, 2 baby land areas, and a city cemetery sector, which dates back to the Nevada territorial days. This cemetery contains memorials to Carson City pioneers of every denomination, ethnic background, and economic and social standings. Why are cemeteries important? The history of the rich, the poor, the famous, and infamous are recorded in our burial grounds. These graves are often the only record or artifact remaining to tell the story of a community and the individuals who founded and formed it. Each tombstone is an irreplaceable historical document containing some of the region's earliest chronicles. The ready accessibility of these sites allows us to view, appreciate, and study the documents to learn of our own early history, as they are a valuable educational tool in which we teach our past. And last but not least, to enjoy the artwork and symbolism carved upon them. There are several historic sections located in the Lone Mountain Cemetery, but for my program today, we will be taking a tour on the south and southwest sections of the cemetery. The burial plots you will see are only a small sampling of the rich, the common, the young and old whose lives and experiences built our town, as these cemetery grounds reflect Carson City and Eagle Valley at its earliest time in history. With each elaborate monument, or the iron and wood fencing, or the large family plots, we learn about the essential part of the peoples who have lived and worked in our city down through the ages. Anatomy of a headstone. There are 7 basic elements usually found on gravestone inscription. There is the header, the epithet or epitaph, the name, and many times where and when that person was born, the date of death, many times their exact age, the formula, which is how the person died, and then the eulogy, usually some type of verse. Many of the old tombstones placed here were made of sandstone from Abe Curry's quarries, which was located on the site of what is now the Nevada State Prison on 5th Street in Carson City, Nevada. Some of the monuments we will see today are examples of the sandstone, and also those carved of marble and granite. Included in our tour today, along with speaking about the Lone Mountain residents, we will also explain what some of the headstones, carved markings, and symbols mean as events of personal importance and historical interest are found in the inscriptions on the stones. The epitaphs and epitaphs provide important genealogical information which may be lost or destroyed in early written records. These stones also provide important social and cultural information. As mentioned, you will also see that historic graveyards contain some of our earliest examples of art. Studying the symbolic illustrations and/or sculptures on the head and footstones reveals attitude toward death and immortality. Central themes such as sorrow, everlasting light, purity, and innocence are symbolized by certain motifs, including, but not limited to, weeping willow trees, roses, draped stones, doves, lambs, wreaths, ivy, vines, anchors, crosses, stars, shells, and many, many more. As a piece of trivia, being the headstones are a piece of artwork, many times you will see the undertaker's or carver's signatures, just like any artist would, usually on the bottom left or right side of the tombstone. In Lone Mountain, you will see many of the older stones carved with H Muckle from the Stones and Marble Works in Virginia City, who provided the finest of quality in marble headstones. Let's begin our tour. This is a very interesting burial site. It belongs to Mary Davis. She was 24 years of age at her death. Her husband, George, ran a dry goods store on the corner of Carson and 6th Street, site of the present-day Ormsby House. Husband George is buried next to Mary, but has no marker. To describe the iron fence, there are doves on the fence gate, plus the weeping willow tree. Doves mean purity, and weeping willow trees mean sorrow or mourning. The lamb on the tombstone is matching the lamb motif on the iron fencing. Lambs symbolize purity and innocence. Lambs are usually found on a child's grave or that of a young person. Mary was only 24 years old at the time of her death. V&T Railroad magnate Henry Harrington was 81 years of age at his death. He was the superintendent of the Virginia and Truckee Railroad. About family plots. In some cemeteries, a family may purchase a small area of the cemetery to be dedicated to the family. As you can see with family plots, there is usually a single large headstone engraved with the family name marking the area, and then each individual family member who is buried in the family area will have his or her smaller headstone marking the individual grave. In some cases, a family plot of single plots purchased as a package by a single family. Quite common are family plots, and it is nice to know that perhaps all family are together in the afterlife as they were while living. Here is another unique marker belonging to John A. Malay. He was 36 years of age at his death. The headstone resembles a tree, as Malay was a member of Woodmen of the World, thus the distinctive memorial. The meaning of the cut-off branches is a life cut short. There are many emblems on this tombstone. The scroll means symbol of life. The dove with olive branch means peace. The axe and wedge are symbols for workmanship and the progress of culture. You can see on these markings the words Dom Tese Clamet, which means, though silent, he speaks. Here is a double grave of John H. Kincaid, 70 years of age at his death, and Elizabeth F. Kincaid, who was 80 years of age at her death. John was the third governor of Nevada from 1879 to 1882, and was the first territorial governor of Alaska in 1884. Elizabeth, of course, was the first lady to each state. Their monument, with the cross with circle, is a Celtic cross. The Celtic cross is a symbol used in many contexts, both religious and non-religious. Decorated with ornate Gaelic patterns, the cross is also called the Sun Cross by some who interpret the ring to represent the sun. The Celtic cross is a symbol of national pride. Those who identify with the Celtic tradition use this cross as a way to show their Irish heritage. A heroic inscription is on the marker of W. J. Daniels. 51 years of age at his death, he was a native of England who fought in the Crimean War. Note the inscription, Hero of Balaklava. This was the famous charge of the Light Brigade in 1854. The meaning of the top rounded marker is a curved doorway into the world to come. The clasped hands carving means, in this case, marriage, as his wife is buried with him as well. Notice the nice eulogy. Scripted is gentle in manner, but resolute in deed. Newspaperman Harry Miguel was 49 years of age at his death. Henry began his career in the newspaper business in California, and when he moved to Nevada in 1865, he assumed editorship of The Appeal, which later was called The Morning Appeal, which was later called the Carson Daily Appeal, which was later called Nevada Appeal. And newspaperwoman Nellie Miguel Davis, wife of Henry, completely took over the newspaper after his death. Nellie was the only woman reporter in Nevada legislature in 1877 and 1879. Nellie was also the only woman to chronicle a prize fight, that being the March 17, 1897 bout between Gentleman Jim, James John Corbett, and Ruby Robert Prometheus Fitzsimmons. Nellie lived to be 101 years old. You will notice that Samuel Post Davis is buried here as well. He was Nellie's second husband and took over the Nevada Appeal after he and Nellie were married. The obelisk formation comes from the Egyptian culture, and this type of monument often represents a ray of light or is the symbol of ascension. Here is an interesting death that occurred to Jakob Strait. He was 53 years of age at his death, and according to newspaper accounts, Jakob died from drinking too much cold water. Again, a monument of a tree with cut-off branches, meaning a life cut short. The anchor motif means hope. The rope represents a binding connection. The ferns mean sorrow or sincerity, and the seashell means rebirth. Strait was a member of the Woodmen of the World Fraternal Society, as evidenced by the log marker upon which hangs the tablet bearing information. No marker remains, but Jakob Klein, who was 68 years of age at his death in 1899, was born in France and immigrated to Nevada in 1860. He started the famous Carson Brewery with John Wagner and August Burhauser. We raise our glasses and cheer to you, Jakob. Jacob's daughter Mary is buried here. Her heart-shaped headstone represents love, courage, and sorrow. Heart-shaped markers were typically placed on a child's grave. A rare wooden marker for your viewing pleasure still stands for Robert Fowler, who was 44 years of age at his death. Fowler died en route to Carson City on the overland train at Laramie, Wyoming. His brother, Richard, lived in Carson City, so had Robert interred here rather than where he died. Not many original wooden markers are still in existence in this cemetery. Here are two residents who had interesting deaths. Edward Wilmot was 66 years of age at his death, and wife Fanny Wilmot was 59 years of age at her death. The interesting part of their demise was that Edward and Fanny died within 2 days of each other in 1886, not knowing the other had passed away. Notice again the clasped hands motif, meaning, in this case, marriage, and the 2 daisies, which mean gentleness and purity in thought. Also notice the eulogy on the bottom of the marker, which reads, "Leaves have their time to fall, and flowers to wither at the north wind's breath, and stars to set, but all, thou hast all seasons for thine own, O death." David B Cooke, 61 years of age at his death, immigrated from Scotland with his wife, Montgomery, and 2 sons, David and James. The Cooke's son, James Cooke, was 33 years of age at the time of his death. He was killed while attempting to jump onto a moving train. Notice there are all 7 tombstone anatomy inscriptions on both stones. These include the header, epitaph, name, formula of death, date, eulogy, and age, as well as biographical and ethnic information. The verse inscribed on David's stone was carved by H Muckle of Virginia City, which his signature is quite visible on both markers. A noted Carsonite, George W. Kitzmeyer, was 63 years of age at his death. He was a native of Germany and started a furniture business in Carson in 1873. After his death, his sons expanded the business to include manufacturing coffins, which then led them to the business becoming an undertaking establishment. A family plot, the ferns on George's marker represent sincerity and sorrow, and the flowers convey love, grief, happiness, and other emotions. A very well-known stagecoach driver, Hank Monk, lays to rest here. Hank was a heavy drinker and frequented the old Ormsby House Bar to do so. On a paranormal slant, it was reported by staff and customers alike that Hank's spirit remained at the saloon, being seen sitting in his favorite chair near the wood-burning stove. On Hank's old tombstone, you will see a wreath which signifies victory, memories, and passing on to eternal life. This tombstone shape is known as rounded top, rounded shoulders. On Hank's new headstone, it is awesome that there is an image of Hank, thanks to Sharky Begovich of Sharky's Casino in Gardnerville. Here is a very unique crypt. This tomb belongs to the Patrick Henry Clayton family. Patrick was 55 years of age at his death. He was a founding member of the Democratic Party in Nevada and was a loud and boisterous secessionist who did time for being so. Above the doorway, you will see the motif of 3 rings of the IOOF, International Order of Oddfellows. The 3 rings mean friendship, love, truth. There is one broken ring. That signifies the death of a lodge member. Here lies George Tuffley, 73 years of age at his death, and his wife Sophie Tuffley died at 60 years of age. They were the owners of the St. Charles Hotel in 1865. George was also the state treasurer of Nevada from 1882 to 1890. Notice the footstones. Many footstones were mainly put in place representing whose grave was at that site until a larger monument could be carved and placed. These are great examples of fancy footstones, obviously from wealthy residents. You can see on Sophie's tombstone, the draped cloth motif means mourning, respect, and loss of a member. The carvings on George's marker of the scimitar, crescent, and 5-pointed star was a signifier for a member of the ancient Arabic order of the Nobles of the Mystic Star, the AAONMS, which when the letters are rearranged, spell Masons. 2, the 3 rings of the IOOF, International Order of Oddfellows, are carved in the stone. The roses on the side of the monument represent purity and love. A founding father of Carson City, here lies Abram McCurry. He was 58 years of age at his death. Note his many contributions to Carson and the state. He was also the founder, plus first superintendent of the U.S. Mint. Notice on Abe's monument the compass and square, the signifier of the Freemasons fraternity. The symbolism is mainly, but not exclusively, drawn from the manual tools of stonemasons, the square and compasses. The Masonic G stands for God and geometry. A doctor, Anton W Cheddar, was 45 years of age at his death and was a native of Russia who served as a surgeon in the Crimean War. He immigrated to Carson City, met, fell in love with, and married Abe Curry's daughter, Lucy Ann. Cheddar also ran a medical practice out of his home. His newspaper advertisement proudly stated, "Gunshot wounds are my specialty." The splendid carving of a weeping willow tree was quite common among the wealthy during this era of time. The weeping willow trees represent sorrow and mourning. The cross means faith, and the urn the cross sits on is an ancient Greek symbol meaning the soul is mourning. The weeping woman signifies mourners of a human race, as opposed to the weeping angel carvings signifying heaven is mourning. Here is the grave of child Jenny Clemens, daughter of Orion Clemens, who was secretary to the territorial governor, William Nye, and her mother, Mary Eleanor Scotts, and niece of journalist Samuel Clemens, Mark Twain. Jenny fell ill to spotted fever on January 29, 1864, and she died of meningitis, which is a complication of spotted fever, on February 1st. She was just 9 years and 5 months old. On a paranormal slant, several reports to the caretaker of Lone Mountain Cemetery are in regards to a phantom glowing light over Jenny's grave during the twilight and nighttime hours. Thank you so much for watching Psychic Creations History Series. If you would like to be a guest on my Psychic Creations History Series, you can contact me at my website, which is www.sandypsychicstones.com, or at my email address, which is admin@sandypsychicstones.com. Thank you for watching Psychic Creations History Series, and remember, history created who we are today.